Black mail order bride adopts an orphan boy who turns out to be the lost heir. What would you do if an act of kindness changed not just your life, but the destiny of an entire family? If a child you saved from the streets turned out to hold the key to a fortune, and enemies who'd stop at nothing to claim it? In the harsh world of 1891 Texas, where a black woman faced prejudice at every turn, and orphaned children disappeared into the night, sometimes the most unexpected families are forged in fire. Before we discover how a mail-order bride, a lost heir, and a lonely rancher became an unbreakable family against impossible odds, take a moment to support this channel. If you believe that love creates family and courage protects it, hit that like button, subscribe, and tell us in the comments about chosen family that changed your life. Now, let's journey to the dusty streets of San Antonio, Texas, where fate is about to bring together three souls who need each other more than they know. Naomi Washington stood on the platform of the San Antonio train station, her carpet bag at her feet, and her head held high despite the stares. At 26, she was used to being looked at. A black woman traveling alone in Texas always drew attention, and not the kind sort. She'd come west as a mail-order bride for Thomas Crawford, a rancher who'd specifically advertised for a woman of color, educated and capable to help manage a ranch and provide companionship. His letters had been thoughtful, discussing books and philosophy, never once making her feel like a commodity being purchased. But Thomas Crawford was 2 days late meeting her, and the station master had made it clear she couldn't stay on the platform much longer. Naomi was considering her limited options when she heard the cry. A boy, no more than 7 or 8, was being chased through the station by 2 rough-looking men. The child was small, dirty, dressed in rags but running with desperate speed. As he darted past Naomi, one of his pursuers grabbed at him. Without thinking, Naomi stepped forward and brought her carpet bag down hard on the man's arm. "What the hell?" the man started. "Leave that child alone," Naomi said firmly, her schoolteacher voice cutting through the noise of the station. "Ain't your concern, lady. That's a street rat. Probably stole something." The boy had stopped running and was staring at Naomi with wide eyes, startling blue eyes in a face streaked with dirt. He looked terrified but also hopeful, as if he couldn't quite believe someone had intervened. "Did you steal something?" Naomi asked the boy. He shook his head mutely. "They's lying," the second man said. "That kid's been living in the streets for months. Probably got fleas and disease. You don't want to get involved." But Naomi was looking at the boy's face, seeing the intelligence in those blue eyes, the fear, and something else, a fierce determination to survive. She'd seen that look before in her own mirror, in the faces of other black children who'd grown up knowing the world was stacked against them. "He's with me," Naomi announced. "My ward. If you have a legitimate complaint, take it to the authorities. Otherwise, move along." The 2 men looked at each other, clearly weighing whether this was worth the trouble. The station master was watching now, and several other passengers had turned to see what the commotion was about. Finally, with muttered curses, the men backed off and disappeared into the crowd. Naomi turned to the boy, who was still staring at her with those remarkable blue eyes. "What's your name?" she asked gently. "Daniel," he whispered. "Daniel. I don't remember my last name. I've been on the streets a long time. Are you hungry, Daniel?" He nodded, and Naomi's heart broke at the desperate longing in his face. "Come on, then. Let's get you fed while I figure out what to do next." She bought them both food at the station cafe, the cheapest items on the menu, as her funds were limited, and watched Daniel devour bread and cheese like he hadn't eaten in days. He probably hadn't. "Where are your parents?" "Daniel?" Naomi asked. The boy's face clouded. "Don't know. I remember a big house and a lady who was nice to me, but then there was a fire and men took me away. They said they'd find my family, but they never did. They put me in an orphanage, but it was bad there. Mean. So I ran away." "How long ago was this? 2 years? Maybe 3? "I can't remember exactly." Daniel looked down at his hands. "I know I'm supposed to remember my family, but it's all fuzzy. like a dream. Naomi's mind was working. A child who'd lost his family in a fire, with no memory of his last name, living on the streets for years. It was heartbreaking. It was also suspicious. Why hadn't the authorities done more to find his family? Why had he ended up in an orphanage that was bad enough to make a small child run away? Miss Washington? Naomi turned to see a man approaching, tall, perhaps 35, with weathered features and kind brown eyes. He wore rancher's clothes and carried himself with quiet confidence. "Mr. Crawford?" Naomi stood. "Thomas, please, I apologize for being late. There was trouble at the ranch. Cattle got loose, took 2 days to round them up." He noticed Daniel. "And you've made a friend?" "This is Daniel. I intervened when he was being chased. He's an orphan living on the streets." Thomas studied the boy with the same kind eyes, and Naomi saw something shift in his expression. "Daniel, would you excuse us for a moment?" When they'd stepped a few feet away, Thomas said quietly, "Miss Washington, Naomi, I should tell you something about why I placed that advertisement, about what I'm really offering." "I'm listening." "My ranch is successful, but I live alone. Have for 5 years since my wife died of fever. We never had children, and the loneliness." He paused. "I'm not looking for romance, Naomi. I'm looking for partnership, companionship, maybe eventually family. But I want to be honest. I know what it's like to be judged for something you can't control. My wife was Mexican, and the prejudice we faced was considerable. When she died, I realized I wanted someone who'd understand that struggle. Someone strong enough to face a world that might not welcome them. And you thought a black woman would fit that description," Naomi said. "I thought a black woman would understand what it means to build a life in a place that doesn't always want you to succeed, to hold your head high when others try to make you small." He glanced at Daniel. "And I thought maybe if we found the right partner in each other, we could build something good. Maybe even a family." Naomi felt something ease in her chest. Honesty. After weeks of uncertainty, here was honesty. "I appreciate your candor, Thomas. And I should be honest too. That boy has no one. He's been living on the streets for years, and those men chasing him weren't good people. I told them he was my ward without thinking, but now..." She looked at Daniel, who was watching them anxiously. "I can't just leave him here." Thomas was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled. "Well then, looks like we're starting our family sooner than expected. Let's take him home." The Crawford Ranch was 2 hours outside San Antonio, nestled in hill country that was beautiful in a harsh, unforgiving way. The house was substantial, not a mansion, but a solid 2-story structure with a wide porch and stone chimney. Outbuildings dotted the property, and Naomi could see cattle grazing in distant pastures. Daniel sat between them in the wagon, his eyes wide as he took in the landscape. Naomi noticed how the boy kept looking at Thomas as if waiting for him to change his mind and send him away. "Daniel," Thomas said as they drove, "have you ever worked with horses?" The boy shook his head. "Well, you're going to learn. Every person on this ranch has jobs, even me. You'll help with the horses, learn to ride, help Miss Naomi, Mrs. Crawford, with whatever she needs. In exchange, you get food, shelter, and schooling. How does that sound?" "You mean it?" Daniel's voice was small. "I can stay, if you want to. This can be your home." Daniel looked at Naomi, his eyes swimming with tears. "Really?" Naomi reached over and squeezed his hand. "Really, we're a family now. Unconventional, maybe, but real." The first weeks were an adjustment for all of them. Naomi threw herself into managing the household, which had been neglected during Thomas's bachelorhood. She cooked, cleaned, organized, and began teaching Daniel to read and write properly in the evenings. The boy was remarkably intelligent once he was fed and rested. He soaked up knowledge like a dry sponge, reading everything Naomi gave him. He also showed an unexpected affinity for horses, gentling even the most stubborn animals with patience and intuition. Thomas watched both of them with quiet satisfaction. He and Naomi settled into an easy partnership, working together to run the ranch, sharing meals and conversation, slowly building trust. But there were challenges. The neighboring ranchers made their disapproval clear. A black woman married to a white rancher, even in the relatively progressive 1890s, was still scandalous in Texas. Naomi faced cold stares in town, shops that suddenly didn't have what she needed, and whispered comments that followed her everywhere. She bore it with dignity, her head high, never letting anyone see her flinch. But at night, in the privacy of her room, she'd sometimes let the exhaustion show. Thomas noticed. One evening, he found her on the porch watching the sunset. "They're making it hard for you," he said, sitting beside her. "Nothing I haven't dealt with before," Naomi replied. "Being black in America means developing thick skin early. It's not right. No, but it's reality." She looked at him. "Do you regret bringing me here? Bringing us here?" "Never." Thomas's voice was firm. "Naomi, in 3 weeks you've made this place a home again. Daniel's thriving and He paused. "I'm happier than I've been in 5 years. If people want to judge us, that's their problem, not ours. Some of them are talking about more than judgment. I heard in town that certain men are saying we're not fit to raise a white child." Thomas's expression hardened. "Let them try. Daniel chose us, we chose him, that's all that matters." But the threats weren't idle. 2 months after Naomi's arrival, Sheriff Wade appeared at the ranch with an official-looking man in a suit. "Thomas," the sheriff said, his expression uncomfortable. "This is Mr. Hartwell. He's from the San Antonio Orphans Court. There's been a complaint." Hartwell stepped forward, his face cold and disapproving. "We've received reports that a white child is being raised in inappropriate circumstances. I'm here to investigate and potentially remove the child to proper care." Naomi felt ice flood her veins. Thomas moved to stand beside her, his body language protective. "Daniel is our ward," Thomas said firmly. "We've provided him with food, shelter, education, and love. What's inappropriate about that? He's a white child being raised by a black woman," Hartwell said flatly. "That's against the natural order. The boy should be with his own kind." "His own kind?" Naomi's voice was steel. "You mean people who'd let him starve on the streets? Who'd chase him like an animal? Who put him in an orphanage so terrible he ran away at 5 years old?" Nevertheless, nothing. Thomas's voice was dangerous. "You want to take that boy? You'll have to go through me. And Sheriff Wade here knows I've done nothing illegal. Daniel came to us of his own will. We've cared for him better than any institution ever did." Sheriff Wade shifted uncomfortably. "Thomas, you know I don't like this, but Hartwell has legal standing. If he presses the issue, then let him try." Thomas crossed his arms. "I'll fight this all the way to the state Supreme Court if I have to." Hartwell's eyes narrowed. "You'd spend your fortune on a street rat. I'd spend everything I have to protect my family." The standoff was interrupted by a small voice from the doorway. "I want to stay here." Daniel stood in the doorway, his blue eyes blazing with a determination that seemed too old for his young face. He walked forward, positioning himself between Naomi and Hartwell. "Miss Naomi saved me. She and Mr. Thomas gave me a home. They teach me things, and they're kind, and I want to stay with them." His voice grew stronger. "You can't make me go. I'll just run away again, and I'll keep running until I get back here." Something in the boy's defiance seemed to give Hartwell pause. He studied Daniel's face carefully, his expression shifting from disdain to something more calculating. "What did you say your last name was, boy?" "I don't remember it," Daniel said. "But you remember a big house, a fire?" Daniel nodded slowly. Hartwell pulled out a newspaper clipping, studied it, then looked at Daniel with new interest. "Sheriff, I need to speak with you privately, now." The 2 men stepped outside, leaving Thomas, Naomi, and Daniel in tense silence. "What's he doing?" Daniel whispered. "I don't know," Thomas replied. "But whatever it is, we'll face it together." When the men returned, Hartwell's entire demeanor had changed. He wasn't looking at Daniel with disdain anymore. He was looking at him with something like greed. "The boy can stay," Hartwell announced. "For now. But I'll be making inquiries. If what I suspect is true, there will be significant interest in this child's welfare." He turned to leave, then paused. "Take good care of him. He might be worth more than you know." After they left, Naomi and Thomas looked at each other with growing unease. "What was that about?" Naomi asked. "I don't know, but I don't like it." Thomas knelt in front of Daniel. "Son, is there anything else you remember? Anything at all about your family?" Daniel's face scrunched in concentration. "Sometimes I dream about a man. He had a big mustache and he'd bounce me on his knee. And there was a library with lots of books and—" He paused, something flickering in his eyes. "A name. Whitmore. Does that mean anything?" Thomas went pale. "Whitmore? Are you sure?" "I think so. Why? What's wrong?" Thomas stood abruptly and walked to his desk, rifling through old newspapers. He found what he was looking for and spread it on the table. "Naomi, look at this." The headline read, "Whitmore Estate Fire Kills Prominent Banker, Wife Missing, Young Heir Presumed Dead." The article was dated 3 years earlier. It described a devastating fire at the Whitmore mansion in Austin that had killed banker Jonathan Whitmore. His wife had disappeared, presumed to have fled with their son, but neither had been found. The estate, worth a fortune, had been tied up in legal proceedings ever since, with Jonathan's brother Edmund claiming inheritance in the absence of direct heirs. "Daniel," Naomi said softly, "look at this picture. Is this the man from your dreams?" The newspaper included an illustration of Jonathan Whitmore, a distinguished man with a large mustache. Daniel stared at it, his face going pale. "That's him. That's the man who bounced me on his knee." "Dear God," Thomas whispered, "you're not just any orphan. You're Daniel Whitmore. You're worth a fortune." The implications were staggering. If Daniel was truly the Whitmore heir, he was entitled to one of the largest estates in Texas. But it also meant he was in danger. Someone had clearly wanted him dead or lost 3 years ago. The fire, the disappearance, the convenient placement in a terrible orphanage. It all suddenly seemed sinister. "We need to be very careful," Naomi said. "If Edmund Whitmore has been claiming that inheritance, he won't be happy to discover Daniel's alive. More than that," Thomas added grimly. "If Edmund was behind the fire, behind Daniel's disappearance, he might try again." Daniel looked between them, fear replacing the brief joy of recovered memory. "Will you send me away?" "Never," Naomi said firmly, pulling him into her arms. "You're our son now, and we protect our family." That night, after Daniel had gone to bed, Naomi and Thomas sat up late, planning. "We need proof," Thomas said. "Solid proof that Daniel is who we think he is. The memory alone won't be enough. And we need to do it quietly," Naomi added. "If Edmund Whitmore gets wind that Daniel's alive before we have protection in place, he'll come for him." Thomas ran his hand through his hair. "I'll hire a private investigator, someone discreet. We'll gather evidence, build a case, and then we'll reveal Daniel's identity when we're ready, with lawyers and witnesses and protection. In the meantime," Naomi said, "we keep him safe. We keep him hidden. No one needs to know he's anyone but our adopted son." But keeping secrets in a small Texas town proved difficult. Hartwell's visit had sparked gossip, and within days, rumors were flying. Some said the Crawford ranch was hiding a valuable child. Others whispered that Edmund Whitmore himself had taken interest in a certain orphan boy. Then, 2 weeks later, the first attempt happened. Naomi was in town buying supplies when 3 men approached her wagon. They weren't locals. They were too well-dressed, too professional. "Mrs. Crawford," the leader said, tipping his hat with false courtesy, "we're here on behalf of Mr. Edmund Whitmore. We understand you've taken in a boy named Daniel." "I don't discuss my family with strangers," Naomi replied, her hand moving slowly toward the rifle Thomas had insisted she carry. "Mr. Whitmore believes the boy may be his nephew. He'd like to meet him. If Mr. Whitmore has legitimate concerns, he can take them to court. Now move aside." The man's false courtesy dropped. "This can be easy or hard, Mrs. Crawford. Give us the boy and we'll go peacefully. Refuse and—" He didn't finish because Naomi had brought the rifle up, cocked and aimed at his chest. "And you'll what? Threaten a woman in broad daylight in front of witnesses?" She raised her voice slightly. Several townspeople had stopped to watch. "These men are threatening me. Someone fetch the sheriff." The man's jaw tightened, but he backed off. "This isn't over." "No," Naomi agreed. "It isn't. Tell Edmund Whitmore that if he wants to meet Daniel, he can do it properly through legal channels with witnesses present. What he can't do is send thugs to intimidate us." The men left, but Naomi's hands were shaking as she drove the wagon home. The game had changed. Edmund Whitmore knew Daniel was alive and knew where to find him. When she told Thomas what had happened, his face went grim. "It's time," he said. "I've been waiting for the investigators' report, but we can't wait anymore. We need to go public. Get Daniel's identity established legally before Edmund can make a move. Or," Naomi said slowly, "we disappear. Take Daniel somewhere safe where Edmund can't find him. Running makes Daniel look like a pretender. No, we stand our ground. We fight." Thomas met her eyes. "But Naomi, this is going to get ugly. Edmund Whitmore is powerful. He'll use everything, including the fact that you're black and I'm white, to discredit us. Are you prepared for that?" "Are you?" Naomi countered. "Because they'll come after you too. Question your judgment, your fitness as a guardian. Then we face it together." Thomas took her hands. "For Daniel, for us, for the family we've built." The legal battle began the next week. Thomas hired the best lawyers in Texas, and they filed a petition to establish Daniel's identity as Daniel Jonathan Whitmore, rightful heir to the Whitmore estate. The evidence was compelling. Daniel's memories, his distinctive blue eyes matching family portraits, a birthmark the private investigator had discovered that matched descriptions in family medical records. But Edmund Whitmore fought back viciously. His lawyers argued that the boy was an imposter, that the Crawfords were opportunists trying to claim a fortune through fraud. They focused heavily on Naomi's race and her inappropriate relationship with Thomas, suggesting she'd manipulated him into this scheme. The newspapers had a field day. "Black woman claims white heir," ran one headline. "Interracial couples grab for fortune," ran another. Cartoons depicted Naomi as scheming and Thomas as a dupe. The pressure was immense. Naomi faced open hostility in town. Someone threw a brick through their window with a note, "Get out while you can." Their cattle were poisoned, their fences cut. Thomas was frozen out of the Cattlemen's Association. Through it all, they protected Daniel. The boy attended school. Thomas had hired a tutor to come to the ranch, and they shielded him from the worst of the newspaper coverage. He knew he was special, knew there was money involved, but they tried to keep his childhood as normal as possible. One night, Naomi found Daniel on the porch staring at the stars. "Can't sleep?" she asked, sitting beside him. "Mama Naomi." He'd started calling her that a month ago, and it never failed to warm her heart. "Why do people hate us?" Naomi chose her words carefully. "They don't hate us, sweetheart. They're scared. Scared of change, scared of people who are different, scared of having their beliefs challenged. But we're not scary. No, we're not, but to them, the idea that a black woman and a white man can raise a child together, can be a family, can be happy, that challenges everything they think they know about the world. That's stupid." Naomi smiled despite herself. "Yes, honey, it is. But stupid doesn't mean it's not powerful. People hold on to their beliefs very tightly, especially when those beliefs make them feel superior to others." "I don't care what they think," Daniel said fiercely. "You're my mama, Thomas is my papa, that's real." "Yes, it is, and no matter what happens with the estate, with the lawyers, with Edmund Whitmore, that won't change." The court date arrived on a sweltering August day. The courtroom was packed with journalists, curiosity seekers, and Edmund Whitmore's supporters. Edmund himself sat at the plaintiff's table, a distinguished-looking man in his 50s with cold eyes and a cruel mouth. Daniel sat between Thomas and Naomi, holding both their hands. He wore his best clothes, his hair neatly combed, looking every inch the young heir he claimed to be. The trial lasted 3 days. Thomas and Naomi's lawyers presented their evidence methodically. Medical records, Daniel's memories corroborated by former Whitmore servants, expert testimony about the birthmark, Analysis of family resemblance in photographs. Edmund's lawyers attacked viciously. They brought character witnesses who questioned Thomas's judgment, suggested Naomi was a manipulative fortune hunter, implied the whole thing was an elaborate con. They focused extensively on race, suggesting no respectable family would allow a black woman to raise a white heir. Then came Edmund's testimony. He took the stand with practiced grief, describing his brother's death, his desperate search for his nephew, his assumption that the boy had died in the fire. "And now," Edmund said, dabbing his eyes, "these people claim they found him. But how convenient that he remembers just enough to claim the fortune, but not enough to recall his true family. How convenient that he was found by people who'd clearly benefit from such a discovery." The prosecutor, the judge had appointed one given the stakes involved, stood for cross-examination. "Mr. Whitmore, you've claimed to have searched extensively for your nephew. Why didn't you find him in the San Antonio orphanage? I wasn't aware he was there. Yet records show the orphanage contacted your office 3 times about a boy matching Daniel's description. You never responded." Edmund's composure cracked slightly. "I receive hundreds of letters. I can't be expected to." "You're claiming you want to find your nephew, yet you ignored multiple leads." The prosecutor pulled out documents. "Furthermore, we have testimony from the orphanage director that a man matching your description visited the facility, saw Daniel, and specifically said that boy was not the Whitmore heir." "That's a lie, is it? Because we also have evidence that you've been selling off Whitmore estate properties, consolidating assets, preparing to claim final ownership once the death certificates are finalized." The prosecutor's voice was cold. "Tell me, Mr. Whitmore, how much money have you made from your brother's death?" The trial turned on that moment. Edmund's mask slipped, revealing the greedy, cruel man beneath. His testimony fell apart under aggressive cross-examination, and by the end of day 3, even his own lawyers looked uncomfortable. The judge took only 2 hours to deliberate. "This court finds," he announced, "that the minor child known as Daniel is, in fact, Daniel Jonathan Whitmore, legal heir to the Whitmore estate. Furthermore, this court finds credible evidence that Edmund Whitmore knowingly abandoned and endangered said child, potentially contributed to circumstances surrounding the original fire, and has been fraudulently managing the Whitmore estate for personal gain." The courtroom erupted. Edmund was on his feet, shouting about injustice and conspiracies. His lawyers tried to calm him, but he was beyond reason. "This isn't over," Edmund screamed at Thomas and Naomi. "You think you can steal what's mine? I'll destroy you! All of you!" Bailiffs removed him from the courtroom. The judge continued, his voice rising over the chaos. "Custody of Daniel Whitmore is hereby granted to Thomas and Naomi Crawford, who have demonstrated exemplary care and devotion. Edmund Whitmore's guardianship is permanently revoked, and criminal charges will be filed regarding his conduct." Daniel looked up at Naomi, tears streaming down his face. "Does this mean—" "It means you're safe," Naomi said, pulling him close. "You're officially ours, and no one can take you away." The aftermath was chaotic. The newspapers that had vilified them suddenly praised them as heroes. The townspeople who'd shunned them now wanted to be associated with the family of the Whitmore heir. Thomas and Naomi navigated it all with the same dignity they'd shown throughout, accepting apologies but never forgetting who'd stood by them and who'd turned away. Daniel inherited a vast fortune, but Thomas and Naomi established strict trusts and management systems. The money would be there when Daniel came of age, but for now he was just their son. They stayed on the ranch, living the life they'd built together, using some of the estate funds to improve the property and help other families who'd faced prejudice and hardship. But the most important changes were internal. Daniel, once a frightened street child, grew into a confident, compassionate young man who never forgot where he came from. Thomas, who'd been lonely and adrift, found purpose in family. And Naomi, who'd faced rejection and hatred simply for her skin color, proved that strength and love transcend any prejudice. 3 years after the trial, they sat on their porch watching the sunset, a tradition they'd maintained. Daniel, now 11, was reading beside them, absently petting the dog that had appeared one day and decided to stay. Thomas had his arm around Naomi's shoulders. They were comfortable, settled, unmistakably a family. "Mama Naomi," Daniel looked up from his book. "I've been thinking." "About what, sweetheart?" "About how lucky I am. Not because of the money, because those men were chasing me that day, and you stepped in front of them. Because you chose to help when you could have walked away." "I couldn't walk away," Naomi said softly. "I looked at you and saw a child who needed help. That's all." "That's everything," Daniel corrected. "You saved my life. Then you and Papa Thomas gave me a home, fought for me when powerful people wanted me gone, loved me when the world said you shouldn't." He set down his book. "When I'm grown, I want to use the money to help other kids like I was. Street kids, orphans, children nobody wants. I want to give them the chance you gave me." Naomi felt tears prick her eyes. Thomas squeezed her shoulder. "That's a fine dream, son," Thomas said, "and we'll help you make it happen." As darkness fell and they moved inside, Naomi reflected on the journey that had brought them here. She'd come to Texas as a mail-order bride, uncertain of her future, facing prejudice and hardship. She'd saved a street child on an impulse of compassion. That choice had led to legal battles, death threats, public humiliation, and a fight that had tested every ounce of strength she possessed. But it had also led to family, to love, to a son who'd been lost and was found, to a husband who'd become a true partner, to a life that mattered, that made a difference, that proved love was stronger than hate. The newspapers had called her a fortune hunter, a manipulator, worse. They'd questioned her fitness to raise a white child, her right to be part of an interracial family, her very humanity. But in the end, what mattered was this: a child was safe, loved, and given the chance to grow into the person he was meant to be. That was worth every hardship, every insult, every threat. Because family, real family, wasn't about blood or race or what society deemed acceptable. It was about choosing each other, day after day, and never letting go. Years later, when Daniel Whitmore, now a prominent philanthropist and advocate for orphaned children, would tell his story, he always began the same way. "I was lost, forgotten, chased through streets by men who saw me as either worthless or as a prize to be claimed. Then a black woman I'd never met stepped between me and danger. She chose to help when she had every reason to walk away. She faced hatred, threats, and legal battles to keep me safe. She loved me when the world said she shouldn't. That woman, Naomi Crawford, was more than my adoptive mother. She was my hero. She taught me that love creates family, that courage means standing for what's right even when it's hard, and that the most unexpected connections can change the world. My story began in tragedy, but it was rewritten by kindness, and I've spent my life trying to offer that same kindness to others, because that's what family does. They save you, they fight for you, they love you, not because you're worth a fortune, but because you're worth everything. If this story of chosen family, courage in the face of prejudice, and love that transcends societal boundaries touched your heart, please show your support by liking this video and subscribing to our channel. Tell us in the comments about a time when someone chose to help you when they didn't have to, or about family you've built beyond blood ties. Check out our playlist for more stories of unexpected families and the power of compassion in the Old West. Your support helps us share these important tales of hope, love, and fighting for what's right. Thank you for watching, and remember, family isn't always about blood. It's about who chooses to stand beside you when the world stands against you. It's about love that refuses to be defined by prejudice, and courage that protects those who can't protect themselves.